The idea, insight, or secret you need for massive impact is just moments away. It's time to claim your career crown. The podcast where business owners and entrepreneurs share the keys to the kingdom to help you open the vault to your greater success.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Petite to Queen's Claim Your Career Crown podcast. I'm your host, Lynn Whitbeck, and today I am joined by this incredible, wonderful woman, our guest, Grace C.W. And we're going to be talking about Stagnant Communication Syndrome. And this is really going to be a great show. We're going to talk about what it is and how you can overcome it. And I want to say, if you get a ton of value in this episode, I would love to invite you to subscribe because it costs nothing to subscribe. Now, I want to let you know about Grace. Grace is an Asian American speech language pathologist with over 23 years of expertise, empowers and converts introverted, shy, and quiet women to overcome stagnant communication syndrome. Passionate about fostering harmony, Grace helps clients resolve communication breakdowns very effectively, enabling them to feel understood and impactful in all areas of their lives. Through self-valuing, boundary discovery, and proactive communication skills, Grace's clients find greater support and peace with partners, family, and work associates. She guides them to speak confidently, embrace their worth, and create fulfilling relationships. Grace believes that amazing solutions are within reach through clear, intentional communication. And I am with you there. Grace, I am so thrilled to have you on the show today. Welcome.
Well, thank you, Lynn. Thank you for the invitation and opportunity to speak on your show. So, yeah, thank you.
Well, I'm thrilled to be here, and we've gotten to know each other through a networking community, which has been amazing. And so I've learned quite a bit about you, but I want you to share that with our audience about what inspired you to get started down this path.
Right. So I grew up with my traditional Chinese parents. So I had to learn the Eastern culture way of communication. And then, of course, I grew up in Canada and the US, which is very much the Western way of communication. So what I learned was what was okay for me to speak at school was not okay at home. And then when I go to school, they will say, well, why don't you speak up? Why don't you share your ideas and thoughts? And it's like, because I can't really do that at home. So I was kind of figuring out like, okay, what can I do at home and what can I do at school? And then I was just kind of like bridging that, right, for the communication. So that way I could still communicate with my parents in their traditional way and then communicate in a way that made me felt like I could share and be heard at school with my teachers, with my peers.
Wow. I mean, that is definitely something that I can see how that inspired you to go down this path of becoming a speech pathologist. So, I mean, as we get into this, because I had never heard of stagnant communication syndrome until I heard you talk about it. And so I would love to have you share what it is for our audience.
Sure. So, I like to think of this analogy, like if you think of like stagnant water, right? When water is not moving, it's just still. And over time, the water gets really dirty, gets murky, and, just really all muddied and nothing's moving, nothing is flowing, right? So if you think about like stagnant communication, where, when you're communicating, you might find yourself in the same old patterns, saying the same old things like, why isn't anybody listening to me? I can't share X, Y, and Z because nobody's going to hear me anyways. What's the point? And over time, all of that becomes really stagnant, which prevents the person, right, from really wanting to express him or herself, because they have this like energy where they feel like they're never heard. Why bother sharing it? So then it just feels very stale in their communication. They feel like it's always just going nowhere, and the same pattern just flows there over and over and over. And so it's just like being that, then the energy becomes like that muddy feeling, nothing moving. It's all just muddled up.
Okay. Yeah. Well, that's a really good analogy, and I can visualize that. So when people are in that, though, how do they self-identify, or how do other people identify to help them?
Right. So, a lot of the times, it's because of past experiences or the story or the experiences that they had, they feel like, oh, if I share this, I'm going to get in trouble, so I'm not going to share it. Or maybe past experience, they shared it before and someone laughed at them, or they weren't heard. And so now they have started this story in themselves to say, well, this is what's happening. It's not going anywhere. And so over time, they perhaps then withhold the information. They want to say something, but they're afraid that if they did, because of past trauma or experience or what have you, that when they did say something happened.
Okay.
And they don't want that to happen again.
Sure. I totally recognize that. So how do they self-identify that this is, what's happening, so that they can make a change?
Well, one of the things I always say is, first of all, know that you do have control over your conversation or your communication. A lot of the times what happens is the person, and myself included, I've done this, is like, oh, I don't have control over this. Somebody else is leading the show. And one of the things that I learned and I've taught people is to start to use like I statements, rather than like saying, oh, you never listened to me, or, you don't pay attention to when I had said this. And so this really gives the power to somebody else, and which makes it like we've now like relinquished our own control and given control to somebody else. And so one of the things that I've learned, and I'm teaching my fellow covert introverted woman, is to take the power back by just starting with I statements. Like, I feel, or I would like, so that way you gaining back the control. And now you feel like, yes, I do have control over how this communication or conversation can lead.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. And it sounds like you have a real solid process for how you help people on this journey. What does that look like?
Right. So first, it's all about self-discovery, right? A lot of the times we are our worst enemies, right? We tend to self-criticize more. We tend to look at others' accomplishments and forgetting our own accomplishments. So a lot of the things I start off with is, first, let's be our own best friends. So it's about self-discovery first, understanding ourselves, appreciating ourselves. So I have some tools around that. And then we go into more of the energy of communication, because, communication, yes, there's skills that you can learn, how to be a better speaker, or, how to present information. However, there's energy involved, because when you're with another person, you're having the exchange with another person's energy along with your own. And sometimes the breakdown may not just be because of what was said, but the energy around it.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. So, I love that, be your own best friend. That's a really great way, as you said, a place to start, and then really looking at that energy. So with the people that you work with, or the people who are struggling with stagnant communication syndrome, why does it become such a challenge?
Well, I would say like it all the challenges may be different for each person
Yes.
because we all have our own history, our own background. Like, even though there might be some similarities, however, my background, my history, may have prevented me from being able to speak up. And so I have a certain stagnant around the communication. And you might say, oh, I have that similar story as well that also may have caused you to have some stagnant communication. So it's really first about embracing who the person is. And then from there, moving forward to like, okay, why is there this stagnant? Where did it come from? Did it come from a story, from, a certain trauma, or did it come from, something that happened and now this is the story you're telling yourself?
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, that experience and really getting to that root cause is the only way that you can ever truly overcome stagnant communication syndrome. Am I right here?
Yes, you got it.
Yeah. So, and sometimes I'm sure that process can be painful. It can be difficult to sort of peel back the onion. There could be a lot of tears involved. Um, But for those people who are either experiencing this, or for those who are around someone who they might who they feel that they don't communicate well with or effectively with, um, how is this a blind spot where they're not recognizing that there's something deeper going on? I mean, why do you feel that this can typically be a blind spot, the stagnant communication syndrome?
Well, think about, relationships. This is where I like to think about relationships, right? Because if you want to have a relationship, you want to build and maintain that relationship, you're going to need to have communication, right? If you don't have communication, how do you communicate, or how do you even have a relationship in that sense, right? So this is where, I'm about wanting to help people to build and maintain relationship, but do it through communication. That's where I like to focus on, because my whole thing is, how can you have a relationship? How can you build and maintain relationship if you're not communicating?
Yeah.
If you're not speaking in a way that somebody will be receptive, or if you're not even speaking your truth, you're just speaking what the other person wants to hear, now you're going to start to feel, not being heard, perhaps some resentment, perhaps some anger, and then all of a sudden you're going to start to say, well, what's the point? And then the communication starts to break down. Not just break down like, oh, there's a misunderstanding, breaking down where both parties stop really communicating with each other. They're just talking about maybe daily stuff like, oh, I have bills to pay, we have to pay for this and stuff, but they've stopped connecting on an emotional level where they can have and maintain that relationship.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
No, it does. I mean, this may seem like a silly thing to bring up, but it's sort of like this classic rom-com thing where there's a misunderstanding and somebody just doesn't come out and ask the other person, what's this really mean? Will you clarify this? Is that what you meant? And they're making assumptions. And I mean, that's on a very, obviously very light, humorous level, but it's like this common theme that you see a lot. This is very deep and very serious, the stagnant communication syndrome. But I think for our audience to help relate to it, I've actually only seen a few times, like in like that rom-com, where the other person says, hey, listen, my sister overheard this. Is this what you meant? I mean, what's the deal here? And then gives the other person like, no, they only heard half the conversation. That is not what really happened. Right. And so I think that's one of the, and it's like, okay, all things are revealed now. It's all taken care of. We don't have to go down this path.
Right.
So, but for this very serious topic of the stagnant communication syndrome, what should listeners do next? I mean, what's the first thing that they should do or action they should take if they feel that this is something that they are experiencing, or one of their close friends or loved ones is experiencing, to start that process to overcome it?
Well, first, like I say, be your own best friend, right? Remove away any assumptions, because you made, and that's the one thing, is people do make assumptions, right? And so remove the assumptions, remove any of the judgment. A lot of the times people don't want to say something is because they're afraid of the judgment. How would that person judge me? How am I going to judge myself and everything? So remove all of that first, all of the, what I call the inner dialogue that goes in our head. Remove all of that first, and more take it from more like an objective view, like if you were viewing a movie screen, right? And just say, okay, what is it that I want to share, and why is it important for me to share this? And when you remove everything else, right, you're just coming down to the information, the nitty-gritty information of what it is you want to share and why it is important to share it.
Yeah, that is I love those 2 points. It's so clear. Thank you. Grace, is there anything you wish that I had asked you today that I have not?
Well, how about communication styles?
Okay, let's talk about that.
Because, one of the things is that, we all have our own styles. If you think about personality styles, it comes from motivation, inner motivation, outer motivation, right? As well as, we have our own personalities and stuff. So if you think about how people dress, right? There's like the boho style, the business casual, what have you. And so communication styles, right? So everybody has different communication styles. And so when you understand different communication styles, it also helps to understand your own style and what somebody else's style might be. And therefore, then there's going to be some gaining of understanding of like, oh, I see what the person might do a certain thing or say a certain thing. They're not trying to do it to make the person upset or be insensitive, so to speak. It's just because of their personality. That's how the words they use resonate with them, or the tone of voice or actions. It's because of their style that they have.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. I am a big believer in the communication styles, so I'm so glad you brought that up. And it is how you can be a better communicator, is to recognize when someone has a very different style than you do, and to flex your own style to meet them, to meet them halfway, to meet them where they're at, so that you can communicate better. So Grace, thank you so much for sharing stagnant communication syndrome, what it is, and how to overcome it. I know that our audience is going to be as fascinated as I have been about this conversation. Where can they connect with you and find out more about you?
Right. So I actually have a free quiz. It's a Know Your Unique Communication Styles quiz. So, we're talking about overcoming stagnant communication syndrome, and part of that is knowing your communication styles. So you can find me at Grace Solutions. That's solutions.com/quiz.
All right. That's fantastic. And that link is going to be right down below with all of Grace's links to be able to connect with her. So she's just one click away. This has been such a fascinating discussion, and I want to thank everyone who tuned in. I really appreciate your being here and being part of our community. And Grace, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and insights today. It's been truly wonderful.
Well, thank you, Lynn, again for being on your show to, share information, because I would love for everyone to not experience stagnant communication syndrome and to have that beautiful relationships that they would like to have, whether it be at home, at work, because, relationships are important, and having the ability to have the relationship is, of course, through communication.
All right. Wonderful. Thank you so much.
What was your biggest takeaway from this episode? I would love to hear about it. It's important to share the things you love. If you loved this episode, a 5-star review really helps keep the podcast coming to you regularly. Also, if you want to get more sales strategies to grow your business, make sure you subscribe right now. If you want to get results even faster, I invite you to download my sales strategy checklist at petitetoqueen.com/checklist. This has been Lynn Whitbeck, host of Claim Your Career Crown. I'll see you next time.